Hi students, today we're going to talk about values and ethics. And they're different. And both really impact how you will practice social work. So what do we mean by values? What do you think of when I use that term? What are your values? Well, a very basic dictionary definition would be values are something that we feel are worthwhile. So they're principles and standards and qualities that we regard as desirable. That's something we desire, something we want, something that we hold very dear to us. And how do values grow? How are they developed in a person? Well, they grow out of personal experiences. I mean, values will be shaped by how you grew up, where you grew up, right? Who you grew up with. Where did you go to school? Did you go to church or not? What developed your value system? What impacted? What influenced how you think about things, how you feel, what you value in life? So it grows out of personal experiences. Someone that grew up in the Bronx would most likely hold different values than someone who grew up on a farm in Kansas, just from a different experience. Experiences influence your values. And then, this is important, values change with experience. So over time, values change. Values change. A little short one-page article that I'll have online for you to look at just talks about how values can change tremendously in young people from high school to college, where they have new experiences and meeting different people. And then I can tell you from personal experience that my values changed tremendously once I had children. So absolutely, values change with experience. You may move across the country and see what people in a different geographic space value and feel is important, something that you might not have ever grown up with, something that you might not have ever experienced, and that may influence how you feel about things. I went to school in Wisconsin, and people felt differently about dairy and cheese than they do in New York, where I never heard about it before. They valued that. Did I value it? No, because I didn't grow up where that was how people made money. Okay, so they have a different set of values. So certainly geography can change values. The way that you grew up can change values. Some people grow up in a large, very close-knit family, and some others don't. So they value that experience, and they seek that experience out, even in other relationships. So values certainly change over time, and they grow out of your personal experience. And then think about values this way. Values are what we ultimately hold up as worthy and good. We feel that our values are good, and then we make a value statement and say they're right. They're right. And we feel this way because we believe that there is the right and wrong way to achieve the things that we set out to achieve. So how do you achieve those ends? Will be based on what you value. And then values are based on ideologies, beliefs about what is good, what is right, and what is true. Something that you hold as valuable and true may be very different than one of your classmates. Do you see that? So, values are said to be generalized, emotionally charged conceptions of what is desirable, what we feel is desirable. And let me tell you, values are emotionally charged. We're all in Social Welfare History and Policy 500, the foundation class. And we have as many different value sets as is sitting around the table. Every one of us is different. We have different perceptions of things. We perceive things differently. And our values, we hold very dear. So since we hold them dear, they're emotionally charged, right? They're emotionally charged based on how we feel. And most of the time, we feel strongly about what we value. Now, they can be shared. Values can be shared. Values can be shared, absolutely. And they can be shared. But a value set for each individual will be unique. And then they provide a means of organizing. Many times you will be with other people and you'll desire to be with other people that share your values, right? So those of you who were raised, if any of you were, in a family, with a strong Catholic faith, okay, will be really desire to be around people who also share that. And then other people might not feel as comfortable with that. Okay, so that's one thing. And you can think about your values that way. There are some values that probably we can all agree in. We're all here in an educational setting, so we probably value education. We see education as a means to an end. So we value that. So how are we organized? We're organized by people who share an interest in social work, in the social work profession. And that is going to say something about you. You have different values, most likely, than if I had a group of engineering students in here. And of course, that has been researched, and it is different. It doesn't mean you're right and they're wrong. It just means that there's other things that fuel you. Different things fuel you, interest you. You, being a social worker, are making a statement. It's a value-based profession. And we're going to get into that. And then think about this. People feel deeply about what they value. And then there are value conflicts, and we're going to discuss that. And they can really provoke strong emotional responses. There are issues that we're going to be talking about, that you're going to be talking about even more in other classes. Specifically, those of you who've taken diversity and oppression, most of you have not, but when you take it, it's a class where we really discuss some really heated topics. And topics that do provoke strong emotional responses. In this class we will, because we're going to be talking about social welfare. And social welfare really provokes strong emotional responses. And being a social worker will inevitably, you have strong feelings about social welfare and the well-being of individuals. And that may be different than, like I said, if I had a room of business management students. So, yes, values and a value system can really work to organize people and sift people. People with similar values tend to congregate. One of the challenges with social justice work is to appreciate diverse constructions of values, because you're going to be working with clients who have a different set of values than you do. How are you going to deal with that? How are you going to work successfully with a client whose values are counter to yours? So we're going to discuss that. Now think about something, American values. One thing we all are is we are all sitting in the United States of America. Do you hold values as an American, as someone in America? I don't even know people's backgrounds, of course, yet, but American values. Do Americans agree on a set of shared values? What do you think? Do Americans agree on a set of shared values? If so, what are dominant American values? What are some of the dominant American values? Freedom, right? Equality, yes. Right to bear arms, yes. So let's look. If we talk about American values, such values are often held up as what is correct. They're rarely challenged. American values, they're normal. If you hold different set of values, you're looked at as the other, and you're to be judged. Saying the term even American values just insinuates something that's broadly shared and uncontested. But I bet within this group there are contested values. Some of you talk about individualism, and some of you really are adverse to that. But individualism is an American value, and it's a value that's very criticized outside of America. We're very individualistic, and we're more independent. We value independence rather than dependence. So, American values. Now, when you talk about American values and you say they don't share, that group, they don't share those values, what happens? A view like that closes people off, okay? It denies the complexities and the diversity of beliefs and values and practices all throughout our society. So do you believe that we share American values? Is there a set of American values that we all in this room adhere to? Well, let's face it, as we become more ethnically and culturally diverse, do you see that changing? And is that changing? And is that a part of some of the discomfort that people feel because of the changes that are taking place? I mean, America has gone through quite a demographic change and shift. Obviously, the number of people of color has increased rather dramatically in some places, and people are uncomfortable with it. Many times, think about it, it's because of values. They don't necessarily believe that these different people hold their same values, and they hold them strongly, right? So that becomes a problem. Now, do you see the changes that are taking place, positively or negatively? That also will be based on how you grew up, what is your value system. Some people really value diversity, and other people do not. Where does that come from? Now, these encompassing notions of values may reflect the particular interests of dominant groups, of the dominant group, right? And it was the dominant group, and now that dominant group is being threatened. There's an onslaught of other people coming into this country. And I don't even want to talk necessarily about what's going on currently right now. We have plenty of time over the semester to talk about it. But certainly, people fear that people are threatening their value system. These people coming over don't share our values. They don't share our values. Well, what are our values? So does the dominant group want to maintain the status quo? They don't want their value system challenged. They're comfortable with their values and how they believe things are to be. They believe there's a certain way that things should be done. There's certain values that we hold as true. And there's a threat to that. So I want you to think about that. Maintaining the status quo. What would that mean? And what will that mean for you working with clients? Regardless of the specific concentration or the specific population that you want to work with, what will that mean? Your value system, their value system. When it is the case that we want to maintain the status quo, dominant groups will neglect the notion that others share similar values with them. How do you know that the people coming over don't share your values? One thing I read over and over again, and I'm sure you have too, is think about family. Think about parenting. Do the vast majority of people, regardless of culture, want the best for their children? Now, how they go about getting that may be vastly different. But don't the majority of people want the best for their children? So many times what happens when we work with groups, when we talk about cultural sensitivity, cultural respect, cultural humility, when we work with various groups on those issues, trying to develop that at a place of employment, at a corporation, in an organization, when we try to develop it, we want to show really the similarities of values. How similar values people share, really across cultures, okay? So when we, though, put up a wall and talk about the notion of others, then what are we doing? We're denying people the resources and opportunities to realize specific values because we have shut them up. They're different and they don't believe the same way we do. And they're challenging our status quo. We can't have that. So what do? We cut them off. We stop them from realizing opportunities that can do what? That can really impact them from realizing all of the types of values that they want to attain, things that they want to attain. When we keep people out, an entire group out, because we see them as people that are going to really hurt us, threaten our way of life, what happens? We keep them from really attaining what they see in their life as something that they want, something that they desire. And many times it is the very same things as we want, as the dominant group wants. So that's not fruitful. Much can be learned Much can be learned, and this is important that you think about this, about the practices and the contradictions of dominant values from the perspective of less powerful people and groups. You can learn a lot from really recognizing, learning about, acknowledging the values of less dominant groups versus the dominant group and the status quo. Additionally, individuals and groups may give different meanings to something that they value. Give me an example of this. Give me an example. Success. Okay. You got it. What about the meaning of success? Immediately, some of you may think about success in financial terms, right? Some of you may think about it in financial terms. A person is successful when they attain this, especially when we're thinking about college loans, okay? If I could just not be in debt when I finish this education, okay? So especially through that lens, yes, success is coming out of college with no student loans, okay? So absolutely. So what about success? So some will think about it that way. Okay, some will think about it emotionally, right? You'll think about, I want to come out of school not insane, right? With my mind intact. So I want to be emotionally healthy. If I'm emotionally healthy, I can tackle anything. And then yes, and some of you are talking about social support. So your networks, how strong are your social support networks? So absolutely. What is the meaning of success? All of you will have something different. You can picture something in your mind. This is what success means to me. And it will be different. And it may be different based on your own interest. You got into the social work field. I've read the statements. You want to help people. You want to have an impact on people's lives, mostly vulnerable populations. Okay, so whether you want to serve people with addictions or people that are developmentally disabled, or you want to work with people in the military, former people in the military, whatever group, children, abused children, people in poverty, homeless people, whatever, you mostly want to work with vulnerable populations, and you want to do what? Improve the quality of their life, okay? Enhance their well-being. That's your idea of success, having a successful practice where you're able to, help people. Yes, where you're able to help people get some firm footing. You're able to help people change their lives for the better. And that's what you value. So success is different. It's a different definition. It means something different for everyone. Okay? What about the term family? How many of you are there? Okay, so there will be a different definition for every single person. Okay? Some people will have a more traditional view of family, and they will talk about blood ties, and some will not. But the vast majority of you, will talk about what? You'll talk about support, right? People who support you, whether they be related by blood or not. People that you can depend on, people that are reliable, that you can trust. Okay? Bonds of mutual trust. People that you love, people that love you unconditionally, you'll talk about that. But the definition for each will be different. And then what makes up a family will be different for everyone. Now, most people do value family, but like I said, most people disagree on what the definition a family is. So values, we might have that common value, but then how we define it will be different. Now, I want you to think about this. Think about what family means to you. And I want you to write down a definition of family. What does family mean to you individually? So when we're done here, I want you to write that down. And then, does your definition of family reflect values about what family should be? Does your definition reflect your own family experience? Because what I find is that students, when I ask them to write a definition, they're doing an ideal type. This is ideally what family is. This is what I would like family to be. Or for some, this is what my family is and it's awesome. Okay? So, does your family definition of family reflect the values of something that you wish for, something that should be, or something that actually is? Now, something different. What about family values? That's very different, isn't it? Valuing family is very different than in the United States we say family values. Now, this changes over generations. It was very different when I was young. I'm certainly the oldest person in this room, okay? And it's different. Family values. What do you think of? You see, if I were in your place when I was a student, family values, it was a very traditional definition. It wasn't a definition of family. It was the kind of thing we valued that grew out of it, grew out of a family, okay? What are you thinking? What about family values? What is the concept of family that's promoted in this type of discourse? Traditional family? It was very traditional. My idea growing up was a traditional family. And out of that traditional family, people had specific gender roles. And they were clearly defined. And rarely did people challenge them. It's as simple as that. I'm old. You're saying, how old are you? I'm old. Okay? I'm old. Many people say I'm older than I look. And that's a good thing, I guess. But nobody. Now, also, that can be where I was. I grew up here. I told you in the flip grid. Okay? I grew up here. I left for a long time. And where did I go? I went down south. I went to school originally in North Carolina to get my undergrad. Then I came back to New York to get my master's. And then I went west to Wisconsin to get my PhD. And so, but the traditional idea of family values was not challenged really. And then I guess also the people that I was around. So depending on where you are, who you're with, this might be more traditional than another person's idea of family values. Obviously. And things are very different now than when I was growing up and then even when I was in college. Things are very different. So, they didn't have internet, by the way. It was just starting. Okay, I'm old. But anyways, things were not challenged. But when you think about family values, now we have different types of movements that are challenging all of these issues, right? Are challenging family values, traditional family values, okay? We've got the Me Too movement now. We had, Black Lives Matter. We have all kinds of civil rights movements for various groups that are challenging these values. And the dominant group and the status quo can get uncomfortable about it. And sometimes what happens? Sometimes we embrace it, we move on, but things have really changed. And then we want more change, so we kick even more, okay? It wasn't enough, and now we want more. Women are saying no more to the way they have been treated in employment, okay? They're saying no to the glass ceiling. They're saying no to the harassment they've faced. Things are changing. To traditional gender roles, people are changing, okay? Many of you put on your signature different pronouns you want to become. I mean, it wasn't even a thought when I was young. So things are changing. And then how people embrace those changes is very telling. It does impact the value system. My children are growing up much different, with many different definitions than I ever had as a kid. So things change over time. Now, Barbara and Allen really wrote a seminal piece, and they describe families as powerful socializing institutions. Much of what you are here presenting to me was based on a foundation that you had in a family, regardless of how you define it. It's based on how you grew up. They are powerful socializing institutions. They're good in that there can be arenas of affection when that affection is appropriate, right? When that affection is appropriate. They can be arenas of support or non-support. People grow up, they don't have the type of support that others have had in their families. They don't have the same feeling about family. They find other support networks if their family was so dysfunctional and so abusive, right? So absolutely tensions in families, tensions between siblings, between parents and children, absolutely. What about domination? Domination between genders and across generations, absolutely. They are powerful socializing institutions. So the family is important. Now, the idea of family has changed. Its definition has expanded. But however you grew up, with whatever people or not, you were impacted. Your values were impacted by that. Now, we're going to move on past values, and we're going to talk about the concept of ethics. And ethics are very different, but ethics are really based on values, okay? So in a formal sense, ethics refers to the branch of philosophy. Now, I don't want to lose any of you, okay? Because it's really, you'll understand it, okay? That branch of philosophy that concerns itself with moral decision making and the principles that guide people in determining what is right and wrong. Okay? Social work has a code of ethics. Ethics are very important. So think about this in everyday language, okay? Think about this. Ethics may be thought of as a translation of human values into guidelines for action. So our values on the ground, what do we do? What is our decision? How are we going to intervene with these groups? How are we going to intervene with these individuals or intervene in a community? Okay? So what? It's a translation of human values into guidelines for action. Now, there are two major philosophical approaches that have historically informed ethical decision making. They are ethical absolutism and ethical relativism. How many of you have heard of those? Oh, way back in undergrad. If you took a philosophy course, if you took an ethics course, right? Absolutely. You may have been introduced to those. Now, can you guess which one most, I never say all, most social workers embrace? Let's think about it. What are ethical absolutists? Well, ethical absolutists stress the importance of fixed moral rules. Fixed. Does that mean flexible? No. Fixed. And they contend that actions are inherently right or wrong. We all know people like this. Everything's black or white. There is no gray, right? We know that. And we know people who operate that way. Those are ethical absolutists. It is wrong what you did. You stole a piece of candy. That is wrong. I don't want to hear it. That is wrong. You had an adulterous affair outside of marriage. That is wrong. No. I don't want to hear the background. I don't want to hear anything about your wife or your husband. I don't want to hear anything about it. That is wrong. Okay? An ethical absolutist. Everything is inherently right or wrong, black or white. Now, a relativist is what? They reject that. They reject that. They argue that ethical decision-making is contextual and may be judged on the resulting consequences. Okay? So, when people choose to do something, they behave in a certain way. And you'll learn this in human behavior class, right? Many times they're making a rational choice about something. We need to have context, right? Person in context. Does that sound more like social work to you? We need more of the story. Things may not necessarily be black and white, okay? It's contextual. It's based on the context. We need to know the background. What was the family? What's the history? We need more information, okay? A relativist is going to get a little more information, okay? Now, one of the major traditions in ethics, and I want you to think about this, because we're going to be going through the history of social welfare. One of the major traditions in ethics comes from the Judeo-Christian tradition. It emphasizes righteousness before God and duty to God and neighbor. That's one of the traditions in ethics. So this is where that right and wrong comes from. And then there's an emphasis on duty and rights. And that tends to characterize contemporary approaches to codes of professional ethics. Did you know that? Did you know that our professional ethics were really based on Judeo-Christian traditions? This idea of right and wrong, of duty, how you have a duty to your clients, right? To behave in what? A professional manner, right? Okay? There are lines you do not cross. And so, where do you get those rules? Those are based on a code of ethics, okay? And that's where they come from, okay? So now let's talk about values, ethics, and social work. Social work, like I said, is a values-based profession. And they shape our values, and social work shape the mission of our profession, our relations to clients. How do we relate to clients? It better be professionally, right? Colleagues and members of the broader society, how do we relate to people? As people who hold the values of social work. hold to those values. How do you relate to people? Okay? Now, also, it certainly impacts our decisions and our intervention methods. So, our values and our ethics shape those things. How are you going to treat a client? And then the resolution about ethical dilemmas. Now, in other classes, in your practice classes, you will certainly be talking about ethical dilemmas. How do you address those? How do you resolve those ethical dilemmas? Well, it'll be based on professional ethics. Now, scholars have said that they see human dignity, worth, and social justice as the overarching values of social work. Does that make sense to you? Think about it. Human dignity, we see everyone. If you're a social worker, we value everyone. We see everybody as a valuable human being. So we value their dignity, their worth, and social justice. We embrace social justice. We are a trauma-informed and human rights discipline at this school, okay? We believe that there is trauma in many histories for the individuals that we serve, and we need to know about that, and we need to understand that context. That's where we get to ethical relativism. We need to know the history. And then we need to recognize people's human rights, which is related to human dignity and social justice. So values that shaped everyday practice of social work are, look at this, look at that list. Any of those that you wouldn't think would be on there, or anything that you think should be added to that? No, that's a pretty long list. And it makes good sense, and there's reasonings behind each of those. You will see that. I want you to think about this and have this in the back of your mind as we go through the history of social welfare. Which one of these was not operating throughout the history, and how we felt about, how we treated people in the history of social welfare? Now, the Council on Social Work Education, CSWE, and you'll hear about that referred to as you go through your education here, embraces certain values as guides to professional practice. And social workers have developed ethical codes that translate expressed values into standards of professional practice. So think about that. That's our values that are translated into how we conduct ourselves. So this is what I want you to see. NASS, the National Association of Social Workers, another social work organization that hopefully most of you will be members of by the time you graduate. Their code of ethics states that the profession's 6 core values are these: service, social justice, dignity and worth of a person, importance of human relationships, integrity, and competence. It's very important that you are competent in your practice. That helps to build trust and a mutual bond of trust. Absolutely. Okay, so now, are there values that you would add or delete? Do you question any of these? Okay, so that's where we'll stop for today, but I want you to think about this. Your own personal values, when you are doing the exercises for this week, when you are doing your discussion and then writing your question assignment, I want you to think about these things. How will your values, think about it, impact your relationships with clients, with your colleagues, with others? And then the adherence to a code of ethics. This is our values on the ground. How are we actually going to behave now? You're going to be a professional social worker. You're going to practice in the field. There's respect that comes with that. And will you and do you adhere to the core values of our field? Okay, I will see you next week.